First, Anthony Albanese looks headed for a nasty confrontation with US President Donald Trump when they finally meet, probably next week at the G7 in Canada. A confrontation on defence, plus now one on free speech, after the Albanese government outrageously banned an American Jew, a tech expert, who was coming to speak at a fundraiser or two for Magen David Adom, Israel's version of the Red Cross. Now, on both issues, this government is on the very wrong side, and the US is already complaining about that ban. Now, the defence issue you already know about, I'm sure. Just over a week ago, US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth privately told our Defence Minister, Richard Marles, that China was a huge threat. Australia had to ramp up its defence spending from its pathetic 2% of GDP to 3.5%. When Marles refused to tell journalists what the US had actually wanted, Hegseth embarrassed him by publishing it on his website. 3.5% and as soon as possible. But Marles today was still saying no.
And it's not about chasing a particular number, it's about chasing capability.
Now that's already likely to provoke Trump, who said he won't defend allies who won't defend themselves.
I said, if you're not going to pay your bills, we're not going to defend you.
But now, just to rub a little extra salt in that wound, our government has cancelled a visa for that American Jew, Hillel Fuld, claiming that is a danger to our safety or good order, which is a joke. I mean, Fuld's real sin seems to be that he disagrees with the Hamas terrorist group. The Home Affairs Department of Minister Tony Burke, whose seat of Watson, not coincidentally, is 35% Muslim, accuses Fuld of denying credible atrocities in Gaza, atrocities by Israel it means, and Islamophobia rhetoric in social media posts, only two of which it quotes. Now, these posts, according to Burke's department, were received by members of the Islamic community as inflammatory. So there we have it. I mean, you know, some Muslims here don't like Fuld saying things, and so this Jew should be banned from Australia. Just like Burke earlier banned a former Israeli Justice Minister, can you believe? Ayelet Shaked. And Fuld is shocked.
I literally had to read the email like 5 times. I was like, there's no way that a government is banning some random guy who writes on the internet. I'm not a politician or anything. I had to read the email literally 5 times. The topic of my talk wasn't even politics or anything to do with Gaza or anything like that. I was there to talk about how Israel and Israeli innovation is changing the world and making the world a better place. What's inflammatory about that?
Now, you see that full interview with Fuld on Sherry Markson's show just after mine. Now, what's really extraordinary here is that nowhere in the reasons that Burke's department has published for banning Fuld does it even try to prove him wrong. Now, the first post is from March last year. Burke's department claims it's when Fuld, whose name it misspells, posted in relation to the news reports made by many reliable news sources, it claimed, that at least 112 Palestinians have been killed and more than 750 wounded after Israeli troops opened fire on hundreds waiting for food aid. Well, Fuld had instead written, there was no massacre of Palestinians in Gaza today. Palestinians trampled each other as they fought for the aid that the IDF, the army, sent in, knowing that Hamas was going to steal it. In parallel, the Palestinian mob tried to attack IDF forces who proceeded to shoot warning shots in the air, and when the mob didn't stop, the IDF fired at their legs. Now, Burke's department's account is essentially based, as were the media ones, on claims of the Hamas terrorist group which runs Gaza. Fuld's, on the other hand, were based on the claims of the Israeli Defence Force. Who's telling the truth is even now unclear. But Burke's department clearly prefers to trust Hamas, which has lied so often. Yet Israel in its defence released heavily edited video, yes, showing Palestinians indeed swarming the aid trucks. Now, I don't doubt Israeli troops did shoot Palestinians, but how this tragedy unfolded and how many were actually killed remains highly contested. Burke's department then quotes that second post from Fuld, which was last January, but without saying which of the 21 points Fuld makes are wrong and Islamophobic. But I'll guess. in point 1, Fuld said that up to 15% of the world's Muslims were radicalised. And the data actually backs him. Last year, a poll by a British think tank found that even in Britain, even there, 46% of Muslims supported Hamas. Fuld also said that differentiating between Gazans and Hamas is at best inaccurate, given that Gazans elected Hamas, and a vast majority of them support October 7. And, by the way, no one debated the legitimacy of World War II by saying, well, there were innocent Germans in Germany and we should treat this war in Gaza the same. It was his argument. And again, sure enough, in May, the reputable Palestinian Centre for Policy and Survey Research found in its poll that despite Israel's massive retaliation eroding a fair bit of support for Hamas, even then, 57% of Palestinians it polled still backed it. And half still thought the October 7 massacre of Jews was a good idea. It was worth all what's happened since. Now, apparently most shocking of what Fuld posted that day is that he said, tragically, it is not safe to assume that all children in Gaza are innocent, given children, he pointed out, had been brainwashed to hate Jews and some had killed them. I've seen the brainwashing videos, that's obviously true. But Fuld would sure know about Palestinian children, some, a few, a handful, whatever, being killers. His own brother was stabbed in the back by a boy who was just 17, and he died chasing that young terrorist to save other Jews from being stabbed. Yet Fuld is now being banned by our government for coming here to raise money for Israeli ambulances, even though the government hasn't proved one thing he's said is false. And here's the thing, the Trump angle. This is really going to get up the nose of the Trump administration because Vice President J.D. Vance has already warned America's European allies in a really provocative speech, really put it to them, against shutting down free speech.
Shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process protects nothing. In fact, it is the most surefire way to destroy democracy.
And Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, followed up in April, announcing America may now ban foreigners who shut down free speech of Americans.
We don't want to see an American who happens to be living in London or happens to be living in Europe post something online about American politics or any politics, and all of a sudden they're facing ramifications over there, or they're denied entry, and something happens, we're denying them into our country. If suddenly these become places where people are targeted because of what they said or what their opinion is, then one of the pillars of our shared interest, beyond military cooperation, beyond anything else, is under attack.
And indeed, the US has already sent Australia a warning about banning Hillel Fuld. Like I said, American citizen. Mike Huckabee, America's ambassador to Israel, has already written to Minister Tony Burke saying Mr. Fuld is a highly respected member in his community and well known in Israel. While he holds strong views against terrorism and the kind of massacre that occurred on October 7, he would pose no threat to the people of Australia by his actions or words. But once again, the Albanese government has given the US the back of its hand with Burke today saying Australians have a strong view that we don't want hatred from overseas brought here. They don't want hatred brought here. Which government, by the way, has recently issued tourist visas to nearly 3,000 Palestinians from terrorist-run Gaza with only the most basic initial security checks. I fear this government really is just against importing an American Jewish teller of truths. And Anthony Albanese should now fear what Trump might make of that.